Hi guys, my name is Chad Schroffgerben. I am the founder and content creator for IncredibleTutorials.com. I have teamed up with Smith Micro to bring you these brand new Anime Studio 9 tutorials. So let's get started. In this tutorial, I will go through step by step in creating a project in Anime Studio Pro 9. Now, I won't be going into detail with all the tools and features. That's what my other tutorials that I have released are for. This will simply give you an idea of workflow and what to expect out of some of the tools and features. So to get started, we'll first need to check out some settings and preferences for our project file. If you could go to File, Project Settings, you can see we have a bunch of different stuff here. We want to focus in on the dimensions and frame rate. For our dimensions, we have a variety of different options. We can choose to do broadcast format, something that will fit on iPhone or iPad, and so on. For this particular example, I will choose YouTube HD because I will plan to publish this to YouTube when I am finished. I will also keep the frame rate at 24 frames per second. Once you've done that, click OK. Now, go to Edit, Preferences, and make sure that Consolidate Timeline Channels is deselected. This should be the default for Anime Studio Pro. But I like to have this unchecked. I just want to make sure that you do, because we'll be working with some channels in our timeline. And it's best to be able to see those channels as opposed to having them all consolidated in one channel. So once you check that, click OK. Now first, I want to create a bone layer. So I'll come over here to my Layers panel, make a new layer, and choose Bone. I can name this Character. Now I'll take Layer 1 and double click and rename this Body. And click OK. I'll now put the body layer into the character bone layer. To do this, I'll hold down my left mouse button and drag upwards and just stick it into the character layer. Now we can work with some drawing tools. So I'll come over here now to my left toolbar and choose the Draw Shape tool and grab the Oval tool. Now I'll choose a color here. I'm going to be creating like a monster type guy. I don't know, maybe he's the Anime Studio Pro monster. But so I will choose a skin color that is greenish. Perhaps like this. And click OK. I'll take my line width and make it 5. So now coming over here to my canvas, I'll just click and drag to draw out an oval that looks like this. And release. Now I'll take the Add Point tool. And I'm going to start adding some points throughout here. Now I can take the Translate Points tool and sort of morph this a bit. And that will work. Next is to create some eyes. So I'll make a new vector layer in this bone layer. And I'll name it Eyes. Now grabbing the Shape tool once again, I'll make sure it's an oval. Come over here now to my Style panel. I'll make the color white. The width, I'll make 3. And now, starting right here, I can come in and draw some eyes. Probably bring them in a bit like that. Now I'll make some pupils. So I just can come over here now to the left toolbar and then click on my style panel here and choose a black color for the pupils and then just color these in. And I may need to scoot this up a bit with my Translate Points tool. Now next, I'll create a mouth. So, make a new vector layer. I'll name this mouth. Come over here now to the Add Point tool. Starting right about here, I can just come down and up like this to create a mouth. And now to fill this in, I can take my Paint Bucket tool, select Stroke, and click to fill in. Now let's make some switch layers. Switch layers allow us to switch between sublayers in our timeline. So basically, we can see one layer at a time with the switch layer. I can come over here now to my layers panel and make a switch layer. And now I can name this eyes. I made an eyes vector layer, but now I want to put this into a switch layer. So I can click on my eyes, hold down the left mouse button, and move it into the eyes layer. Now I can double click on the eyes vector layer and name them open and click OK. Next, I can click on duplicate layer. What this will do is make a copy of the current layer I have selected, in this case, the open instance of the eyes. So now I can name this slightly open, and then come over here to my Select Points tool and select all these points. Grab the Scale Points tool. I can squish things down a little bit like this. And if I want to, I can zoom in here. Grab my Add Point tool and create some eyelids for this character. And now, taking the eyedropper tool, I can select the color of my character and then choose the Paint Bucket tool, select both as the option, and click to fill in. Now, I may need to take my Select Shape tool and select these shapes and come over here to my Style panel and reduce the line width to 3, since I also grabbed the line width of this character. And now let's duplicate this layer and name this one Closed. And now I can come in once again with my Select Points tool, highlight all the points, take the Scale Points tool and squish these down further. Grab the Translate Points tool, click on the pupils and delete those, as well as the eyelids. And now take my Paint Bucket tool, and with the color of the skin, just click to fill these in. And I can take then my Add Points tool and add some lines like this. Once again, take the Paint Bucket tool and fill in, and now we have some closed eyes. If I zoom out a bit, I will now make a switch layer for the mouth. So, New, Switch, name this mouth, bring the mouth into the switch layer, double click on the mouth, and we'll just name this one Closed. Now we'll make a duplicate, and we'll name this one Open. And now, taking the Add Point tool, I'll start right about here. I'll just come down, and I'll just add an extension here to the mouth. I can use my Translate Points tool to adjust. And now I can take the Paint Bucket tool, come over here to my Style panel, and choose a color for the inside of the mouth. In this case, I can make it a dark reddish color, and just click to fill in. So now we have our switch layers for the character. Let's make some hair. I'll make a new vector layer, name it Hair, take my Add Point tool, and turn Sharp Corners on. Take the fill color, and we'll make it yellow. And starting right here, I can just kind of come up, down, up, like this. And now Our character has hair. Now let's create the arms and legs. So I will make a new vector layer, and we'll name this arm 1. Zoom in here. I'll grab the shape tool and I'll make it a rectangle. Before that though, I'll make sure I have the same color just by selecting my eyedropper tool. And now with the rectangle tool, I can come in here and draw out a straight rectangle like this. And I'll also come in here and add 2 points, one right here and one right there. Now I'll do the same for the other side. Make a new layer, name this arm 2. And we'll come in just like that. Lower it a little bit. And now we have 2 arms. And now with arm 1, I can actually make a hand for this. So starting with my add point tool, I'll click on this point and just kind of go up like this. Before that though, I want to turn sharp corners off. Now starting here, I can go up like this. And make a hand very quickly here. And then take the paint bucket tool, make sure both are selected and fill that in. And now take the hide edge tool and hide this edge just like that. I can do the same now for the other side. So go into arm 2. Like that, fill in, and then hide the edge. So now we have 2 hands for our character. Now finally, let's add some feet. I'm not actually going to create legs, just little feet for the character, because I kind of want him to look a little bit goofy. So I'll make a new vector layer. I'll name this one foot 1. Can scroll down here, take the add point tool, choose a fill color of something brownish. Starting right here, I'll just draw down like this. Go up. And create a shoe like that. And now I can duplicate this just by hitting the duplicate button, taking my transform layer tool, hitting the flip horizontally button, and now I'd have 2 feet for my character. And finally, I may want to hide these feet underneath the character, so I can just drag these 2 layers underneath the body layer for the character. Now we can add some bones. So let's click on the character bone layer, click add bone, and now starting right down here, I will create the first bone, just a very small one. Then go here and draw upwards to create the second bone. Make sure that the first bone goes from thick to skinny, from top to bottom, and the second one goes from thick to skinny, going bottom up. And now with this bone still selected, I will draw out a bone right here, and then right here. And I'll do the same now for this second arm. So I'll click on this bone to select it. Then take the add bone tool. And the reason why we're selecting this middle bone is because we want to create a hierarchy for these bones. Now I'll select the bottom bone and then add in my bones for the feet. So one more time, select the bottom bone and then add in the second bone. So now, if we take the Manipulate Bones tool, we can play around with how the bones will look. Now, we are on frame 0, so we can play with this character and it will have no effect on the actual animation. Anything you do on frame 0 will be forgotten as soon as you page forward on the timeline. So think of it as your work area. So I'll take my Manipulate Bones tool, and you'll see as I play around with this, things work pretty good in this area. However, if I go down like this, you'll notice that my arm starts to bow in, and especially if I go up like this. We also have some distortion going on here with the body, as you can see. Again, we can move the feet, but again, we have some distortion going on with the body. So what we can do here is take the Bone Strength tool and decrease the strength of these bones so that they only encompass the arms. So now if we play this, you can see that we don't have as much distortion with the body. And we can do now the same with the feet. But we may want to increase the bone strength to include those feet. The other thing you can do too, if you want, is you can bind your layers to bones. So let me show you here how that is done. So first, we want to go into our character and click on one of the feet. Now that you've done that and you're on frame 0, click on the Bind Layer tool in your Bone Tools, and now click on that foot that has that bone. Do the same now for the second foot. And while we're at it, we can also do the same for the body. And if we do the body, we might as well do the eyes, mouth, and hair. So I'll click on the eyes using the Bind Layer tool and just click on the body bone. Now we're using the eye switch layer for this. That means all sublayers will also be connected to the bone. The same goes for the mouth and the hair. So now I believe we are all situated when it comes to what we have bound and what we're using as far as the strength is concerned for the bones. Now you'll notice as I was moving this bone, it's not actually moving correctly. And that's because I forgot to put some points in this arm. So if I come back here to the second arm and take the Add Point tool and just insert some points, we should now see the arm move correctly. Okay, so now, as I said, we have to correct the arms. When they go like this, we have this distortion going on. And of course, when they go down like this, we also have the distortion. So how do we do that? Well, we can use the new Smart Bones feature in Anime Studio 9 where we create actions based on the names of our bones. The first thing to do is to determine the name of the bone. So if I click on the Select Bone tool and select this bone, we can see that Anime Studio automatically named this bone B4. We can name it ourselves if we wish, but for simplicity, I'll keep it as that name, because this is the bone that is causing us the troubles with the distortion. So now, we need to go to Window, Actions, bring up the Actions panel here, and make a new action, and name this action B4. The same name as the bone, and then click OK. Now in the B4 action, while on my bone layer, I can take the Manipulate Bones tool and bend the arm up like this to where we have the most distortion. And now I can go into my vector layer, which would be arm 1. And with the arm now still bent like this, I can take the Translate Points tool and move this up like that. And that's all I have to do. Now double click to go back to Main Line on your Actions panel. Grab your character bone layer and the Manipulate Bones tool. And you can see as I go up now that that action has been corrected. And that is because we made a Smart Bone action for it. We still have to do the same now for this action. So let's make a new action, and we'll name this one B4 space 2. because we're making the second action for this bone. So whenever you make more actions for a bone, you have to number them accordingly. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Once you've done that, click OK. Now we are in the B42 action. Take the Manipulate Bones tool and bend it like this. Then go into the Arm 1 vector layer. Grab your Translate Points tool and bring it down like this. Now just a note, when you are doing these actions, you can only correct the points with your Translate Point tool or the Curvature tool. Those are the only ways you can correct your points. If you need more points, for instance, you're going to have to back out to the main line, go into your vector layer, and create more points before you can correct it. Double click on main line. Now grab the Manipulate Bones tool on my bone layer. Go down. You can see now that the action has been corrected. So now let's do the same for the other arm. So I'll come over here, and now we need to take the Select Bones tool and click on this bone for the arm. So this one must be B6 because we need to use the B6 bone, excuse me. I selected the wrong bone. So we are now on B6. We need to make that new action. So we'll name this one B6. In the B6 action now, we can create the bend. Now, go into the Arm 2 vector layer, find these points and correct them. You can see now this point is kind of giving me a bit of a bend now. It's not straight like my other arm was. And if I want it to be straight like my other arm, I can take my Curvature tool and correct this so that it looks straight. Like that. Now come back here to the character bone on the main line, grab the Manipulate Bones tool, and we can see now it corrects. One more action. B6-2. Bend upwards. Go into the Arm 2 vector layer, take my Translate Points tool, and do some adjusting, as well as some curvature adjustment. Back out to the main line, go into the character bone, and we can see now it corrects in both instances. Okay. For the next step, let's add some constraints to these bones. So I'm on my bone layer, and I'll take the Select Bones tool and select the body bone. Come up here to Bone Constraints and turn them on. And you can see when I do this, it creates a boundary here for where my bone can't breach. And if I take the Manipulate Bones tool, just to demonstrate this, if we go to this point, it will go no more. So I want to adjust the constraint so that we don't get this thing where we see the top of the shoe. So perhaps right about here. So taking the bone constraints, let's put this to about 45. And then this second entry to about 45. So negative 45 and 45. Now I can try this. Still a little bit too far, so we can come back here and adjust this even further. Negative 20 and 20. Just a little bit more. And that will work. Now let's do the same for the feet, because right here we have them going to where we can see the edge. So let's try negative 10 and 10 for these as well. And that will work. So now let's start animating this character out. I am now on frame 0 on the bone layer. So let's advance forward to frame 1 and take the Manipulate Bones tool. and just move our arms down like this. And like this. You can see on my timeline, I now have some keyframes. So now if we advance forward to, let's say about frame 12, I can bring my arms up. Perhaps move my character a bit like this and bring one of the feet up like that. So we kind of have it going like this. And I'd like to be able to bring that foot up a little bit more, so maybe I should go back and adjust my constraint here really quick. To negative, let's say 30. And put this one to negative 30. Animation is really trial and error sometimes. Sometimes you just have to go in and adjust your parameters to get things to work right. So, at this point, I can come in here and raise the foot up even more like that. And now, at frame 24, I can drop the limbs, reset him to here, put this down there, and then go to frame 36. Maybe change the position of the arms, go up like this. So we kind of have this whole thing going on. Now you'll notice as I did this though, that the foot's, the right foot that is, starts to go up right away. And we don't want that to happen. And that's because I didn't set a keyframe down before I started the movement. So at about frame 24, I'm just going to have to come in here and readjust this so it's stationary like that. And then it'll go up when we hit frame 36. And then we can drop it down. And then we can bring everything back like this. If I page forward here, it looks similar to how we had it on frame 1. And that's kind of how I want it. I kind of want it to look similar to frame 1. Now, if you want to duplicate the frames on frame 1 exactly, you can come down here to your timeline, highlight a keyframe, and go to Edit, Copy, come to where you want to paste it, and then Edit, Paste. And you can see now that I have pasted that keyframe, and it looks the same as frame 1's. So now let's say I want to create a loop animation for this character. Because right now, when I play this, you can see he just kind of does this for up to 48 frames. But let's say I want him to repeat that motion for quite a while. What I can do is right-click on the last frame and choose Cycle. Here, I can tell Anime Studio to, once it hits this frame, go back to frame 1 and play it all over again and keep repeating that process. So Absolute, go back to frame 1, click OK. So now when I play this, you can see it just keeps going and going and going, even though I don't have those keyframes in my timeline. I also notice too I have some things going on here with my arms. So I can go back to frame 0. See, whenever you animate, you always want to go back to frame 0 before you make a correction. And then zoom in here and choose my first arm. And all I have to do is just extend these frames in a bit. Or these points, I should say, not frames. And I'll do the same for this arm. And now in my layers, I'll simply bring the body above the arms. So now we have it look like that. Go back to the character and play it out. And we can see it looks better. We still have a little seam right here, so I can always just go back now into that arm and extend that portion out just a little bit more. And now if I play this, we can see that it worked. Okay, now we can add a background for this, so I'll go back to frame 0, go out of my character bone layer and make a new vector layer, and I can name this Sky. Just bring it below the character layer, create a rectangle here, make a gradient for this rectangle. I can double click on the white color and choose a light blue, and then a dark blue. Click OK. It doesn't matter what my fill color is since I'm using a gradient here, but I can just fill this in like that. And then take the Select Shape tool and adjust my gradient. Create another vector layer. And I can name this Ground. Then I can grab my freehand tool, which allows us to draw as if we're using a pen or pencil. And I can grab a color here for my ground. And for the fill color, kind of a theme of greens going on here. But then I can just draw up some land like that, loop it down and over, and then up. And I still have the gradient selected, and I don't want that, so I can just take the Select Shape tool and select the ground and make sure I take gradient off, just like that. And now I can add some scenery and some clouds. So I could draw some trees out, or I can use the Anime Studio library if I wish. So I can go to File, Import, Props, Scenery, and bring in a tree or two. Just kind of place it along the ground here. And I'll bring in another one. I can place it over here. And actually I can place this one in front of the character. Bring it down a bit like this. And I can bring in some clouds as well. I'll do cloud puffs. And then bring that just above the sky. And put them up like this. So now let's add some depth to this scene. For instance, I want the tree to be in front of the character. In other words, I want it to be closer to the camera. So what I can do here is I can click on Tree 4, and I can come up here to the top and adjust the Z properties for the tree. Or if you want a little bit more control, you can click on your motion graph, and then click to create a transform channel for this tree. So as you can see now, I'm on frame 1, I clicked to create a transform channel. And I can double click to go into Layer Translation. Now if I come down here where this blue line is, and I move it up, I can adjust the Z properties this way. As you can see, I'm switching it above. So that's a way to adjust your properties if you want to do it visually. So I can come back here to my channels and just move this over because it's now in the foreground. I can move now this second tree more into the background. So I can come up here and type -0.3, move it more into the background. I probably want my sky to be stationary because when I move the camera around, I probably don't want that to move too much because the sky takes up the whole environment. So I can double click on my sky layer and choose Immune to Camera Movements and click OK. And for the clouds, I can put those way in the background. So I'll put this at like -8. And then take my transform tool and just resize them to bring them back to the regular size. Now the reason why I do this, if I click on my orbit tool, you can see now I have created some depth for this scene. We have the character, we have the tree in front of the character, we have this tree behind the character, and we have the clouds way in the background. This will create some depth for us when we do our camera movements. So now let's add some camera movements. I'll start here at frame 1. I'll click on Track Camera and click the environment as well as the zoom camera. That will create keyframes for me. And now I will go into about frame 48, right there. And I can do a zoom in as well as a track to keep everything in frame. And as you can see, as I zoom in, the clouds are moving slower than that of the background and foreground environments because of the depth I have created for the layers. And I have the smooth camera movement, and I can come in here and grab these keyframes and move it up some to create even a longer pan, as you can see. So I have a very smooth camera movement, but what happens if I want to create the illusion that my character is moving at a more choppy speed? Let's say you want to create a more traditional looking animation style for your character, but you want the camera to pan smoothly. Well, with Anime Studio 9, you can now use your interval settings to create different intervals for your keyframes. So if I click on the character layer, and now I highlight all of my keyframes I created for this animation, making sure I don't select the camera movements. And now I right click on one of the keyframes and choose interval, and I set this to 3. My character will now move at an interval of 3. So if I come back here and play this, we can see now it's a choppier movement, but the camera continued to pan smoothly. So if you choose, you can create a different style for your animations using this method. Finally, if you're into more in-depth animations, you can always choose the onion skin option and select some frames here to see what your character is doing at different frames. And as you can see, I have different outlines going on here, and that's where my character is doing different things at different times. If I page back, the green outlines represent frames to come, while the red outlines represent frames that have already passed. So you have a lot of visual flexibility here when it comes to creating your animations. There are 2 more things I would like to do before wrapping up. First, I have these switch layers I have yet to implement. So if I page forward here on my timeline to frame 1 and grab my character bone layer here and go into that, and right click on my eyes switch layer and choose open, and the mouth to closed, you can start dancing. Let's say at about frame 33, I can right click and choose slightly open, and then page forward a couple frames and go to closed. And at that time, I can open the mouth. And he keeps going. And then we can maybe add some variety here one more time where he opens his eyes. And we can kind of keep doing that sort of stuff. But that gives you an idea of what the switch layers can be used for. They're especially useful if you want to create syncing effects for a voice and a mouth, because Anime Studio allows you to automatically do such things within the software. Finally, the scene will not be complete without music, so I'll go to File, Import, Audio File, choose Music, and hit Open. And now where this music will set, I'm not sure, but I can always go into my sequencer, and I can adjust where I want the music to start. If I drag it forward, I could start it at 48 frames seconds in. If I drag it backwards, I can start it right away, which I think I will do. So now I can play this out, but first I will bring back all my assets here, and I'll hit play. And that's, I guess, pretty rockin'. So now, once you are all done, you can go to File, Export Animation. You can set your video settings, how many frames your animation will be, and click OK. Choose where to save it. Adjust your codec settings, and then render the file out. And this may take some time depending on how long or detailed your file is. You can also take advantage of the Facebook or YouTube uploading features that are available in Anime Studio if you want to upload directly to those venues. And lastly, if you're confused as to what the audience is going to see, at any time you can always render out the current frame by going to File, Preview. You can see now, I can see what the current frame looks like for this particular frame. And that will give you some idea of what your audience will see. And always, as a good rule of thumb, this blue border represents what your audience will see. Everything outside of it will be cut off. There are many more things you can do in Anime Studio Pro. This just scratches the surface. So please play around, watch more tutorials, and before you know it, you'll be creating some stellar animations. If you'd like more information on Anime Studio, please visit the official Anime Studio website at anime.smithmicro.com. Thanks for watching, guys. I have more tutorials out there, so check them out, and I'll see you next time.